The FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early, focuses on saving aggressively, investing wisely, and living frugally to achieve financial freedom before the traditional retirement age. Financial independence means having enough wealth to cover living expenses without needing to work, while retiring early allows you to leave the workforce permanently, often well before 60. FIRE enthusiasts typically save 50% to 70% of their income by reducing expenses and maximizing savings. Investments are diversified across stocks, bonds, and real estate to balance risk and return. Minimalism, emphasizing meaningful experiences over material possessions, is a core principle. To achieve financial independence, the Rule of 25 suggests saving 25 times your annual expenses. The 4% rule indicates you can withdraw 4% of your retirement savings annually without depleting your funds. Approaches to FIRE include lean FIRE, extreme frugality, fat FIRE, comfortable living, and barista FIRE, part-time work. These strategies help individuals tailor their path to financial independence and early retirement based on their unique goals.
Jacob, I've heard you say that retirement is not an age or number. And I think that that's a mindset that probably too few people have. Can you talk a little bit about what are the most common misconceptions about the FIRE movement that you've encountered?
Well, I mean, I don't know how it is these days since I don't really pay a whole lot of attention to the FIRE movement, but like 15 years ago, and it's probably still like that in many segments of society. The idea was that retirement, you needed like $1 million. So it's just sort of like an arbitrary amount. It's been $1 million since like forever. And early retirement was something you did at like 55, 60, a few years before, like traditional retirement. And I think my main contribution to what the FIRE movement has become was to do like a mathematical study, sort of like typical physicist style of looking at the like entire parameter space. So instead of looking at age or dollar amount, I looked at the savings rate, because I kind of realized that it really depends on how much money you want to spend rather than how much money you have. And so I did, instead of going with like the usual 10-30% that professional advisors recommended, I simply calculated everything from 0 to 100%. And it became quite clear that if you save more than 75 to 80% of your paycheck, regardless of how big it was, if you could find a way to live on 20% of what you earned, then you could actually gain financial independence in 5 to 10 years. And that's not a very long working sentence to so to say. So that essentially turned FIRE or early retirement into something that was for the few to something that was like truly optional for everybody if they wanted it. And the big issue there was, of course, that nobody was really aware of it. A lot of people were in denial about it, especially like the first 5-7 years. Even when you talk to like professionals, like bank advisors, they would flat out deny this is impossible. Nobody can do this. And I would have to sort of like drag them by the ear and show them the math. It's like, look, it's just equations that are familiar to you, and then they would go back, do their own math. It's like, hey, maybe I could do that too. But it was really a sort of like a slug in the beginning.
Well, I like that, especially today, because it seems like that age of retiring at 65, so many people feel like they need to work longer and longer.
Right.
But absolutely, the amount you spend is you have some control over that variable, and then you can calculate the equation. Kristy, what inspired you to start your journey towards financial independence and retiring early?
I actually wasn't trying to retire early, and I didn't know anything about financial independence. I was actually trying to buy a house. Having lived in Toronto, one of the most expensive cities in Canada, that was everyone's dream, was to buy a house. And also coming from my background, my parents, basically, housing is their religion. So you kind of get disowned if you don't buy a house. So I didn't want to go into that situation. So what happened was I was tried to save as much money as possible towards a down payment. And I was working as a software developer at the time. And what happened was every time I saved money, the housing prices kept going up higher and higher and higher. And on top of that, my work was getting less and less stable. And there was talk of outsourcing. So it was the stress of needing to buy the house, but then also being worried about losing my job. And then work was very stressful to the point where one of my coworkers one day collapsed from stress and almost died at his desk. And that was my wake-up call to kind of shift in a different direction. And that's when I started doing research and discovered what financial independence was. And back then, it wasn't a movement like it was today. It was actually a handful of bloggers, and of course, Jacob's book. We that was pretty. Everybody knew about that and try to figure out how to become financially independent. There wasn't a lot of examples of non-Americans trying to become financially independent. So luckily, because the amount of money I had saved at the time towards a house was a significant amount, it was $500,000 over multiple years, and I could just pivot that towards financial independence. And instead of being in a massive amount of debt and being worried about losing my job, I ended up becoming financially independent in 3 years, which was faster than the estimated 5 years at the time. And then I quit my job and traveled the world. And now I've been retired for around 10 years now.
So you don't own a home, but you're free to travel wherever you want.
Correct. Yes. And then another one of the things that ended up surprising me was, so after having a child, so my son right now is just turned 10 months old. And one of the things that I thought would happen was, okay, well, after you have a kid, immediately you need to buy a house. And what ended up happening is I still very much enjoy renting, and I enjoyed the security and stability that the portfolio is giving me. And I have zero plans to buy a house.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. Chris, can you tell us about any significant adjustments you had to make in your lifestyle to achieve FI?
So I have kind of a similar story to Kristy. I think like I was on the path. I was saving a lot. I was living a lot of the FIRE principles without knowing that FIRE was a thing. And I think probably all of us found Jacob and then also Pete, Mr. Money Mustache. And it made me realize like, oh my goodness, there's math behind this. And like, you can actually, like he talked about that magical, like $1 million number. And I just assumed you had to have, I thought it was more than that. I didn't think you could retire early. So we were just saving a lot just because kind of for us, it felt good. We were kind of in this community, like an outdoor, like dirtbag climber and ski bum community where people just were kind of living their passions. And so we were just saving because we didn't care about the big house and the fancy car, but we didn't really have a goal until we found the FIRE movement. And it did have that feeling of it had to be this extreme lifestyle. And I do think like when I found early retirement extreme, that was the first blog I found. And I did kind of, even myself, even though I was living it, I felt, wow, this is extreme even for me. But that's kind of what made me want to start writing my story to share it, because I thought, these principles, you don't have to be as extreme, but as long as you're saving, it's all about the savings rate, and the math is quite simple, and it scales to whatever lifestyle you want it to look like. So that's kind of how I got into it.
Jordan, I feel like there's this $1 million number, I think does kind of live in my head. And then with inflation and everything feeling more expensive, I feel like that's not enough. Maybe I need 2 million. So what's your experience and the listeners of your podcast and the people that you talk to? What is this dollar amount?
So I think if Jacob said he looked at financial independence as a physicist, I would say the exact opposite. I started looking at financial independence as a philosopher. And so what I started realizing is that the number actually didn't matter. The question was, how do I do work? Because I think we do work our whole lives. But what we really want to do is work that we can be autonomous, that we can show some mastery towards. We can do these things we really love doing. You're going to be doing work your whole life. So the question is, how do you build both a financial and life otherwise around doing things you really love doing? And I think this is the reason why a lot of people have trouble with a money amount, a dollar amount, because they have no idea what they really want to do with their lives. And so getting to financial independence is some number, and that number maybe can sustain them physically, but what we're really looking for is to be sustained emotionally. And so financial independence can look much different depending on who you are. So you could have $500,000 and spend $200,000 a year, but if you love being a physicist and you go to your lab every day and you love that job, and that job happens to pay you the extra $100,000 or $200,000 a year you need to sustain your lifestyle, in some senses, you've kind of gotten all the things you were trying to get from financial independence, even if you didn't hit some net worth number. So I think the reason why the number continues to escalate is because people really aren't clear about what they want that money to do for them.
So it does take, it requires a lot of thought and planning.
Yeah, money is a tool. And the question is, what do you want to do with that tool in order to live a life that feels maximally free and enjoyable and purposeful? And so again, we like to really spend a lot of time thinking about the number, but I think the number is almost secondary to what's important to us. How do we want to live our lives? And then let's build a financial framework around that that can support it.
Jacob, you've been at this for a long time. What does living your dream look like? How do you decide when you do some work and when you don't?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's definitely the case that each have like their own dreams and desires and reasons why they do this. I mean, like Kristy, I mean, I was not going for the financial independence initially either. I just kind of like eventually found out that it could be like a thing once I started looking into investments, because I had all this money just sitting in a savings account doing like whatever. I didn't know what to do with it. So my original motivation was essentially, I used to be like a sort of like a Star Trek techno optimist astrophysics guy. But when I was in grad school, I discovered like what is now known as the polycrisis, and I decided to see if it was possible to live with a sustainable ecological footprint. And I kind of calculated that to be about $6,000 per person per year in $2,000 in the year 2000. If you do the same calculation today, it's about $6,700 per person per year. And initially that kind of sounded horrible, because I used to be this kind of like earn buy consumer, having the latest electronics and so on. But I took it on as a personal challenge. So that kind of gave me my purpose. But since I was like in grad school and earning about $25K a year and only spending $6K, you know, that kind of left me with like $19K, what to do with that, you know, like, so it just kind of like accumulated on a savings account for 4 years until I began to consider investments in that sense. So I never really thought of low spending as in any kind of sacrifice or deprivation. I just thought of it as a lifestyle challenge. If it's kind of like, if I can figure out how to do this, and I can tell other people how to do this, and basically we would save the planet. So that was my motivation.
Yeah, saving the planet is part of your mission. Doing it sustainably,
pretty much.
Does anyone have anything to add on this segment? If not, we will go to segment 2.